Thank you for coming. My name is Julie Roberts and I'm one of the student advisors here at King's. I'm part of a team that help students here with more of the sort of practical issues that they might come across while studying here. So we don't touch the sort of academic side of things, but we touch all the other things that you might need help and support with whilst you're here. This is a brief guide. It's just to kind of flag up some really key messages, we think, things that we often get asked. So we thought we'd get you all in one place so we can give you these key messages. There's quite a lot to go through, not much time. So this is kind of a taster to give you sort of key messages. And then at the end, there are really useful websites where you might want to look in more detail, or there's contact details for my service. So as I say, we help students with a lot of practical issues, and so generally they're around these kinds of areas. So today we are going to have a quick look at living in the UK and your rights to live here under the EU legislation. Just a refresher on that, make sure you're all up to scratch with that, because obviously there's a lot of change going on in the UK. Some really important stuff around your health, just to emphasise a few things that we think are very important early on. Funding, I particularly work with students on this area. This is one of my areas of expertise, and it comes up quite a lot. So again, just wanted to give you all the headlines around funding. And finally, working. A lot of EU nationals will rely on work as well as study while they're here. So again, some important facts that will help you with regards to working. But the first starting point obviously is to welcome you. Thank you for coming, joining us here at King's, joining us here in the UK. It's obviously a very strange time. There's a lot of unsettled things going on because we're obviously leaving the EU. So this is a period where we're all going through a lot of change, and just like you, we too are sort of waiting to hear the fine detail on all of that. So it is a period of uncertainty, so we're particularly pleased to see that you've still decided to come and join us here in the UK. A couple of things that we do know around the Brexit talks is that the government here have given a couple of reassurances that we can then pass on to students. So for example, as an EU national or an EEA national, a Swiss national, you might be eligible for the lower fee charge here at the university, what we call the home fee charge, the same charge as the UK students. And the government have said that if you're joining us in 2017, then they will ensure that you continue to enjoy that reduced charge for the duration of your course. So that's good news. They've also said that if you're someone who can qualify for help towards your course, then again, that should continue for the duration of your course. So these are good key messages to start off with. Wanted to kind of emphasise those in case there was anyone with concern about what might happen over the next couple of years as we go through this Brexit process. But again, as I say, whilst you're here, we also then wanted to just kind of emphasise what your position is right now so that you're fully aware, and where you need to, you've taken the steps to protect yourself from any changes that are going to go on because of Brexit. Now, within the EU legislation, this has been enshrined for a number of years now. You, I, anyone within the EU can move around and reside in another EU country unrestricted for at least 3 months with no restriction at all. Now that's how it's been for a number of years. It remains that way currently. But at the end of 3 months, people from the EU, if they want to stay, they have to be here under certain categories. And so after 3 months, you need to be resident here either as a student, an employed person or a self-employed person, a self-sufficient person, or you might be the relevant family member of one of those groups. So you may be the spouse of an employed person. You may not have EU nationality yourself, but you're married to an EU national who's living in the UK as an employed person. So you are protected. You have the rights of the EU, the same as the EU national. You may be the child of a student. You may be the child of a self-employed person and you're here in the UK. So as long as you meet one of these categories, that's key after 3 months. But thereafter, there are certain requirements even within these groups. So I'm going to concentrate on the student status right now. You might be here under a different category, and I would strongly suggest that you go away and look and just check that you're covering all that you need to under your particular category. And at the end, there's a very useful website, as I say, where you can look at these things in a little more detail if you need to. But if you're here after 3 months as a student, then these are the key things that you then have to ensure you meet. And that's to remain as what they call a qualifying person. This is the immigration rules. So you are either an EU, an EEA or a Swiss national, or you're the relevant family member of one of these. You are enrolled at an institution. You support yourself financially. And finally, something that does get missed quite regularly is you need to have some form of health insurance to cover you even when you use the health services here in the UK. Now, it is something that gets missed quite regularly because our system here is a little bit different to many other countries. But within the immigration rules, it does specify that students need to have these things in order to remain after 3 months. Now, the best option often is what we call the EHIC card, the European Health Insurance Card. It's something that we can all apply for within our host nations, within our home nations, and it's often free, but not always. It depends on your own country's system. And it's a little card that then you can carry, and whenever you're travelling around the EU, if you need to have health cover, if you need to have health treatment, then to protect you from being charged personally for that health treatment, you produce your EHIC card. You usually have to apply for this from your home country, and the slides that I've got here for you today should all be available on our welcome pages, so a good place to go back to. And then I've got some good links here that you might want to sort of have a look at in your own time. But one of the links I have here is from the European Commission explaining about this card, and then at the bottom it allows you to click on your own details for your own home country. So for example, if you're from Belgium, you have links here in your own language, and you can follow those through, so you're up to scratch with what you need to do within your own home country. So the EHIC card is usually the best thing if you're just coming here as a student. It's to cover you while you're here on your temporary stay. If you can't have an EHIC card for some reason, you don't qualify, or you are planning to stay here permanently, even though you're here as a student initially, then you're required to get some comprehensive sickness insurance, private health insurance, which you can usually find online. Now, I'm not able to give you any specific products that you should buy. That's something I'm not allowed to do. But if you Google comprehensive sickness insurance for EU students, for example, you should come up with a list of typical providers. Now, this is very important, as I say, because if you do have to have some medical treatment, you could be charged because you're not residents of the UK. Not always. You may find that when you're using our health service, people may not even ask you for these kinds of things, but it's really important that you protect yourself in case you are asked. And also, as I say, these are part of immigration rules. And so as we move further along into the Brexit negotiations, it might come up that people need to be able to demonstrate that they're meeting all of the immigration rules in order to stay. So just please protect yourself nice and early. And if you need to, as I say, there's lots of information at the end of this where you can look at this in a lot more detail. Now, I say at the beginning, this often gets missed, this requirement, and that's probably because our system here is a little different to many other European countries. We have the National Health Service, the NHS we call it, and for someone like myself, a resident, I can walk in and I can access services without ever being asked to pay. And that's because I'm a resident, and through our tax and our national insurance payments that we make when we're working, we contribute that way towards our health cover. So it does sometimes get confusing about what rights, what access rights other visitors can have to the UK. The government have produced a very good leaflet, and again you'll be able to open this and have a look yourself, but it talks about the position of students and visitors to the UK. So again, a really useful document to have a look at in a little bit more detail when you get the opportunity. So that was a little quick run through of some of the immigration side of things. As I say, Brexit is something we're all involved in right now, but what I've just explained to you is exactly what I would have explained to students 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. Nothing's changed as yet for our European students, but we just, because of all the negotiations, we just want to emphasize some of those key things that you may or may not have understood about your residence here as a student. But now briefly on to a couple of key messages around health. One of the things we say very, very early on to students is that they should register with a local doctor as soon as possible. You might choose to use our own health service, our own clinic, our health clinic here at the Strand. You're welcome to do that. Or you can register locally where you live. Now, it may depend, your choice is up to you, but if you think about how you feel when you're not very well, think about that when you're choosing which doctor you might want to register with. Because when you're not feeling very well, if, for example, you live 20 minutes or half an hour away on public transport, and you need to get into the campus to see your doctor, that can be quite a challenge if you're not feeling very well. So think about what's local to you. And at the end of this presentation, again, there's a very good website where you can pop in your postcode wherever you're living, and it will give you a list of what's local to you. And usually you just need to give them evidence of your address, and then you can start to register with that local service so you can access them when you're unwell. King's website, the health centre, have a lot of information on these kinds of issues as well. So again, if you want to just read into this a little bit more detail, you should find lots of information on the King's Medical Centre pages. And again, emphasising the importance to do this nice and early, because you really don't want to start having to do these kinds of things even when you start to feel a little unwell. So put this on your to-do list quite early on, and that's something to tick off, and then you know that if ever you need to access any health services, you're covered. You've got somewhere to go, you can get the support you need. Here in the UK, if we have an emergency situation, then we dial 999 to get to the emergency services. So if you need an ambulance, if it's something very serious and you need immediate support, if you need the police, the fire brigade, it's 999 that we dial, and that gets you straight through to an operator who will then determine who's best to help you. Now that's emergencies, but if you're looking for support or you need to speak to someone in your local police station, for example, then it's 111 that we use. So there's a distinction between emergencies and non-emergencies. So again, something just to pop into your phone, just be aware, and you've got access to key information. Now, having said that, you could be charged potentially for any health services that you need. There are some exceptions to that, and so I just wanted to just flag those up. So, for example, if you are in a serious accident, and you need emergency treatment, that will be free. That's not something they're suddenly going to ask you about your ability to pay. So there are a few exceptions to the fact that potentially you might be asked to pay towards your health services here. So just be reassured, there are certain things that you definitely can access without being asked to pay. But for example, if you are in an emergency situation and you get that help immediately, then anything that follows that's not deemed as an emergency could be charged. So there sometimes is a blur between what's an emergency and what's sort of follow-up treatment. But if ever you need a guidance on any of these sorts of things, this is the kind of help that the Student Advice Service can give you. And now a quick overview of some of the funding that may be available to you. And I'm referring to government funding here, funding that our government makes available to potentially to EU or EEA Swiss nationals. Are there postgraduates in the room today too? A couple? Okay, so I'll cover both. Okay, so as I say, I'm someone who supports students quite a lot around funding, and so I thought these slides would be really helpful to you. Again, you may know all about this, and apologies if this is already things that you're fully aware of, but while you're all in the room, it's really helpful for us to just send these key messages, make sure everybody's on board, rather than people coming to see us one by one and potentially missing what's available. So yeah, you come to uni and you've probably got two sort of key things to think about: your funding for your tuition fees, how you're going to afford to pay for the tuition itself, and then the living costs, your rent, travel, books, food, etc. So we've got two sort of very distinct types of financial sort of demand that you've got to meet. I'm going to cover undergrads first. Forgive me, I just need to unblock a couple of slides. My last session was with some postgrads, so I played around with my slides. One sec. There we go. Okay, so tuition fees. So if you're an undergraduate, we're going to cover undergrads first. If you're an undergraduate, then you may well be charged the lower fee, which for 17-18 is £9,250 per year. Okay, so an undergraduate, you come to join us, we will charge this amount if you meet the home fee rules. Now, we usually don't ask you about that fee until the 31st of January 2018. So when you're enrolling, when you're starting your course, you'll find nobody's asking you to prove right now that you have the £9,250 to pay. We give you until the end of January in order to organise that side of things. And we do that because although some people may choose to pay personally for their fees, a lot of people rely on our government through Student Finance England. And that application process can be slow, and so we give a nice amount of time for people to get all of these things in place before we start asking questions ourselves about your fees. So charge is there. You can choose to pay it yourself if you'd like to, and if you do, then you have to pay that full amount by the 31st of January, or you can apply for help through Student Finance England. Now, Student Finance England can make available to eligible students a tuition fee loan, a fee loan. And if they do that for you, they basically pay the institution on your behalf, and you don't have to physically pay us, but later on you repay the government here, so you start to repay once you have graduated. Now, there's rules around eligibility. Not everybody is necessarily entitled to this. You'll note that the eligibility rules say you need to be an EU national, and so it doesn't go as far as saying an EEA or a Swiss national. An EU national or their relevant family member. They look at your residence to determine if you're entitled, because they're basically aiming at this fund at people who are resident in the EEA or EU, Switzerland, so there's a wide residence area. And they also are testing your purpose for your residence. So there's a few things that when you're applying, you have to demonstrate you meet in order to qualify for this fee loan. One of the other key things that's going to determine if you're eligible is whether you've already had any previous study on your higher education course, in a higher education course. So, for example, if you're somebody who's coming to do a second degree, you may find that you're ineligible for this fee loan. If you're somebody who's started higher education in your own home country for a couple of years and didn't complete, and then want to come here and you start your education again, this could be an issue in terms of eligibility for this fee loan. So if you're hoping to rely on this fee loan, yet you have a history of previous study on a higher education course anywhere in the world, at any point, then I think it's really important that you come and visit with the Student Advice Service so we can give you some one-to-one guidance about your eligibility. Because when you enroll here, you're confirming that you will pay the fee yourself, or that you will have a representative like Student Finance England pay on your behalf. So if your representative doesn't pay, then the charge is on you. So please, if you have any query about your eligibility and you're relying on these kinds of government funds, do come and see someone nice and early. If you apply for a loan, you can choose to take anything between £0 up to £9,250. You can choose the amount that you want. So you might want to pay part yourself personally and get help from the government for the other part. So it's very flexible, and you actually have until May 2018 in which to apply. So there's plenty of opportunity to still apply if you require, but obviously you want to get things done by that 31st of January deadline for us. To apply, you use a form, and there's links at the end, but you download the form, you fill it out, and you send it in. It's a form that doesn't require your parents to complete. It's what we call a non-means tested fund, so it doesn't matter what your parents' financial circumstances are, you can still access this fund if you meet the eligibility rules. So even if your parents are millionaires, but for some reason they're not prepared to help you with your £9,000, you can go to this organisation, Student Finance England, and ask them to help you instead. So you don't have to show parents' income details to get this. So there's a short film here from Student Finance England that just kind of summarises what I've just said.
If you're an EU student thinking about studying at a university or college in England, you could get help to pay your tuition fees. If you've lived in the European Economic Area or Switzerland for at least 3 years before the start of your course, you can apply for a tuition fee loan of up to £9,250 to cover the fees charged by your university or college. You have to repay your loan, but not until you've finished or left your course and your income is over £21,000 a year. The amount you repay each month is based on your income, not what you borrow. If you live outside the UK after you finish your course, you must let us know. The threshold for repayment might be different depending on which country you choose to live in. You're charged interest from the day your first payment is made until your loan is repaid in full or cancelled. The interest rate is based on the UK Retail Price Index and will vary depending on your circumstances. For more information, go to www.slc.co.uk/repayment. To apply for student finance, you need to fill in a paper application form, which is available to download from www.gov.uk/student finance. Make sure you apply as early as possible to get your money in time for the start of your course. For more information, visit SFE's dedicated student finance zone on the student route.
Okay. So someone asked me yesterday, they said they've applied for this loan and they have some papers now which confirm that they've been eligible, that money is theirs and it's going to be paid to the institution. But one of the papers said to please bring this along to your university and to show your university. Don't worry about that. We don't require you to do that. As I say, we use a nice long time frame in which we then gather lots of information directly from Student Finance England. And so come the end of January, we've already received a lot of electronic confirmations of who's eligible, and that's then how we then know who to personally invoice and who's already got their fees covered. So don't worry about having to produce the letter. So that was a quick overview on the fee loan, and the vast majority of you here will only be eligible for the fee loan. But on the odd occasion we meet European students, Swiss nationals, EEA nationals who might be entitled to the extra support towards their living costs. So I just wanted to quickly flag that up in case there's anyone in the room that might benefit from this. We call it the full package. And you apply for a fee loan to help you with tuition, but you can also apply for a maintenance loan to help you with your living costs. Now this is very tightly restricted. There's certain key rules that you have to meet in order to qualify for this extra living cost support. But if, for example, you're an EU national who's been resident in the UK for at least 5 years before you start this course, then you are able to access the full package. You can apply for the same funding as a UK national that's been resident here. We also have a category known as the Migrant Worker category, and that's open to EEA and Swiss nationals as well as EU nationals. And that's very much around people who are resident before the start of this course and are workers while studying. So there's very specific rules around that. And then children of Swiss nationals, we've got a special agreement where, again, if their parents are here working or exercising other treaty rights, then they too can qualify for all of the funding that the UK students can have. So on occasion we do meet EU, EEA or Swiss nationals who can apply for the larger sort of package of support. If you've only applied for a fee loan and sitting here now you're thinking, actually, I think I missed this, I think I can apply for this extra package, don't worry, you can change between one and the other. But what you might want to do is come and see an advisor so we can look at your eligibility with you and make sure that it's definitely sound and then guide you around having a new application with Student Finance England. So I briefly touched on the migrant worker status because it is something that I see a lot of students on. And so I just wanted to give you some quick headlines on this. As I said, it's open to the EU, EEA and Swiss nationals, so it's a wide category of nationalities. Again, they look at your residence to determine if you're eligible. But very key, very key is that anyone who qualifies for this category must also have been ordinarily resident in the UK by the 1st of September 2017 in order to qualify for this category. So if you're someone who's only just arrived after the 1st of September, then you'll never meet this category, even if you then take work and work whilst you study. So this ordinary residence in the UK date is very critical. If you are ordinary resident on the correct day, then and you start to take up some part-time work whilst you study, you may qualify for the extra support. So even if you start to work in your second term or your second year, you may suddenly fall under the rules of migrant worker. I guess the key about the worker status is it's a very strong status within the EU legislation. It gives you a lot more rights if you are classified as a worker. And that's why potentially someone who meets the rules around working can go on to claim a lot more funding than someone who's just deemed as here as a student. So if you have a change in your circs at any point and you meet the residence rules, do come and speak to us and we'll have a look at your eligibility. If there's any Croatian nationals in the room, they need to register with the government here first before they're allowed to work. So it's really important that anyone from Croatia understands some of the extra hoops that they have to go through in order to legally work here in the UK. But if you are eligible for the living cost support, you can see that it's quite a substantial amount. If you don't live with your parents and you're studying in London, then potentially you can access around £11,000 towards your living costs. So you have your fee loan of £9,250 and then potentially up to £11,000 in terms of living cost support. So it's a substantial amount of money. They pay two different rates depending whether you live with your parents or not. So many of you obviously have arrived and your parents are elsewhere. But as I say, if there are any students here that have come to the UK early as children and live with their parents and they've been here for at least 5 years, then they may well find themselves eligible for this extra support. So again, there's a film that I've included on my presentation which talks a little bit more about the sort of living cost support that's available. So I won't go on to that now because of time, but again, it's something to have a look at if you think you just might qualify. So that's there for you at another point. So that was the undergraduate picture. Now I'm just going to have a quick look at the postgraduate picture because it's slightly different. But again, there are options for EU nationals. Now, if you're on a postgraduate course, your fees will vary. There's no one set fee. It will depend on your programme. And usually postgraduates pay their fees themselves and they pay direct to the institution and they have specific instalment dates. They need to pay 50% of their fee by the 31st of October and then the remainder by the 31st of January 2018. So that's the sort of regular terms and conditions that you're signing up to. Now on occasions, postgraduates are sponsored and so they have an organisation perhaps paying the fee for them. And if that's the case, then our credit control, our finance department ask you to make sure you let them know, you give them the detail they need, and then they'll pick things up from there and make sure that the right organisation is invoiced. So follow that up if you're a sponsored student. So as I say, most postgrads pay their own fee, but last year the government here again organised a loan that postgraduate students can access. So for the first time last year, some of our postgraduate students were able to get some help towards their studies. So again, it's through Student Finance England, and for this postgraduate loan you can access up to £10,280.